All right, so today we're going to tackle a really powerful idea from Nassim Taleb called skin in the game. Think of it as a special lens, one that helps you see these hidden imbalances all around us in pretty much every part of daily life. It's the key to understanding why some things just work and last forever, while other things, well, they just spectacularly fall apart.
So, to get our heads around this, we're not going to start with spreadsheets or charts. No, we're going way back to an old Greek myth. And trust me, this story has everything we need to understand the core concept. It's all about this giant, a giant who, for all intents and purposes, could not be beaten.
This giant's name was Antaeus. Now, he had some pretty impressive parents: Gaia, the earth itself, and Poseidon, the god of the sea. And when it came to a fight, he was just invincible. Anybody who tried to pass through his territory had to face him, and nobody ever won. But here's the thing. His real secret wasn't just that he was big and strong. It was something else entirely. As long as any part of him was touching the ground, touching his mother, the earth, he had limitless strength. You could knock him down, sure, but he'd just spring right back up, even more powerful than he was before. Wild, right? And then along comes our hero, Hercules. Now, Hercules quickly realizes he can't win this with just brute force. This giant is just too strong. So he uses his brain. He watches, he learns, and he figures out the secret. And what does he do? He lifts Antaeus clean off the ground, holds him up in the air, completely cutting him off from his power source. And that's it. Game over. The invincible giant was crushed, just like that. And that, right there, that's the whole metaphor Taleb builds on. Just like Antaeus, we and our ideas become weak and fragile when we're disconnected from reality, when we're lifted up, away from the consequences, away from the ground. That direct contact with the real world, it's not just important, it's everything. Okay, so that's a cool story, but what does a Greek giant have to do with us today? Well, what happens when we create our own versions of Antaeus? When we let people in power make huge decisions while they're held safely up in the air, never having to touch the ground and feel the results of what they've done. Taleb points his finger at a few specific types. First, you've got the interventionistas. These are the talking heads and policymakers you see on TV pushing for wars in faraway places. But they never, ever have to deal with the blowback themselves. Then you've got the bureaucrats, the ones who create these maddeningly complex rules and regulations that we have to live with, but they don't. And of course, there are the corporate execs playing with massive risks. If it pays off, huge bonus for them. If it blows up, well, the company, or worse, you, the taxpayer, gets the bill. And just look at the insane logic that comes from this kind of disconnection. An interventionist helps remove a dictator. Sounds good, right? But the actual result on the ground is a total catastrophe, like literally the return of slave markets. And yet, from their ivory tower, they can call it a success because their one little objective was met. Now, compare that to a doctor. Imagine a doctor lowers a patient's cholesterol, but the patient dies from the treatment. Would we call that a success? No way. We'd call it a massive failure. See the difference? The doctor has skin in the game. The interventionist doesn't. There's actually a name for this kind of lopsided deal. It's called the Bob Rubin trade. It's the perfect description for any situation where one person gets to pocket all the profits from a risky move, but when it goes bad, everybody else gets stuck with the mess. It's a system that's literally designed to separate an action from its consequence. So you might be asking, what's the fix for this? How do we fight this dangerous disconnect? Well, the antidote is the whole point of this explainer, the skin in the game rule. Let's really dig into what that actually means. At its core, skin in the game is simple. It just means you have to feel the consequences of your own decisions, good or bad. If you mess up, you pay a price. And it's so much more than just a simple incentive. Think of it as a filter for reality itself. Systems that have this filter built in, well, they learn, they adapt, and they survive. Systems that don't, they're doomed to blow up, sooner or later. And you know what? This is why it's basically impossible to win an argument with someone who has no skin in the game. Why? Because they can always find a clever way to explain away their failures. But reality? Reality doesn't listen to excuses. It has one test: survival. The world gets better not because people read a textbook and change their minds, but because reality mercilessly weeds out the people, the companies, and the ideas that just don't work.
This idea even helps us upgrade our ethics. We all grew up with the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But Taleb points out a flaw. That rule can actually be a license to meddle, to force your own preferences on other people, because you think it's for their own good. He proposes the silver rule is much better. Do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you. It's not about imposing your will, it's about preventing harm. It respects that other people might just want to be left alone. And here's the cool part. Once you have this skin in the game lens, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere. It explains so many things in the world that otherwise just don't seem to make any sense.
Take, for example, something Taleb calls the minority rule. Now, common sense says the majority rules, right? But that's often totally wrong. A small group that is super stubborn or intransigent can actually force its preferences on a much larger, more flexible majority. Think about it like this. Someone who only eats kosher food cannot eat non-kosher food, but a person with no dietary restrictions can eat kosher food. So what happens at a party? To make it easy, everything becomes kosher. The flexible person always gives way to the inflexible one. And this explains weird things, like why a huge amount of meat in the UK is halal, even though the Muslim population is relatively small. The whole system has to bend to accommodate its most constrained member. All right, let's try a little thought experiment. I want you to imagine you need a really serious surgery, and you have to pick between two surgeons. Okay, so Surgeon A looks the part. I mean, perfect suit, smooth talker, you see the Harvard and Yale diplomas hanging right there on the wall. He's got the whole package. Then there's Surgeon B, and, well, he looks more like a butcher from a back alley. His shirt's untucked, he's a bit rough around the edges, and his office is a disaster. So who are you picking to cut you open? The answer? You pick Surgeon B, and you do it without a second thought. Why on earth would you do that? Simple. Surgeon A could have gotten by on his smooth presentation and his fancy degrees. But Surgeon B? For him to be successful despite looking like a mess, he must be phenomenally good at his job. He had to overcome all of that negative perception with pure skill. He couldn't fake it. Reality, the only judge that matters, has already vouched for him. Okay, so this whole idea goes even deeper. We're going to move beyond just money or your job. We're talking about the highest level of this commitment. And that's what Taleb calls soul in the game. This isn't just about risk, it's an existential thing. It means you've put your very identity on the line. It means there are certain lines you will just not cross, no matter how much money is on the table, because doing so would destroy a piece of who you are. We're talking about honor here, not just a pros and cons list. You see this soul in the game with a true artisan, someone who would rather go broke than put out a shoddy product. You see it with entrepreneurs who name their company after themselves. They are literally attaching their family name and reputation to everything they sell. And you see it in anyone, anywhere who is willing to take a real, tangible risk for an opinion they hold. And this all builds up to a pretty stark challenge from Taleb. He says, basically, if you don't take risks for your opinions, you're nothing. Your words are just empty noise. Because real belief, real honor, your real identity, those things are only forged in the fire of consequence. So in the end, this isn't just some abstract theory for thinking about Wall Street or politics. It's a very real and personal question for each of us. So I'll leave you with this. Take a look at your own life, your beliefs, your job, your relationships. Where do you actually have skin in the game? Where are your feet planted firmly on the ground? And where are you maybe floating a little bit, safely detached from the outcome? Once you start asking that question, trust me, you'll start to see the world in a whole new way.